All right. Good morning, everybody. Today's daf is Samach Gimel and Samach Daled. So we got two blocks ahead of us today. So we're going to hit basically two big Mishnayos. But till we get there, we're going to discuss something that we saw before. Actually, it's a different halach than we've seen before, and we're going to try and answer up. So let's see. The bottom. We left off the bottom of Samach Beis and Beis. 4 lines from the bottom. First word, Tanya. So Acherim, who's going to be identified as Rabbi Meir. Acherim hiktim mulim la'arelim. So we discussed, a person has, let's say, kavana for both arelim and mulin, right? Both people had a bris milah, people who didn't have bris milah. So we know the halach is that you can't do Korban Pesach entirely for people who did not have a bris milah. But it says our Mishnah, if it's combined, both of them, then it's okay. So hiktim mulim la'arelim kosher. However, arelim lemulim. But if you had in mind, and first we'll soon see how this is. They're going to have an explanation of this. First, he said arelim for people who did not have bris milah, and then lemulim puzzle. It's no good. So Maishna, understand the difference. Maishna mulim arelim the kosher. What's the reason why the first case? In other words, at one point we said first for the people who had bris milah, and then people who did not have bris milah. That's kosher. Why is that? Tekula or labin and veleka, because at no point, all right, because you don't have all the people, right? Basically, you don't have the Korban Pesach being entirely for people who did not have a bris milah. So arelim lemulin nami. I understand what's wrong with the second case, and eventually he says both la arelim ulamulim. You also don't have a complete 100% of people not having bris milah. So now the Gemara is going to give a couple explanations. So Gemara says, let's say the acherim hold eino l'shchita el b'sof. Right? There's a machlokes as to at what point is the shchita? Is it basically throughout that all machshavas and all thoughts throughout count, or is it only ultimately at the end of the shchita what was said during that time? So let me they hold two things. That the shchita, everything, in other words, basically, even though you might change or say different things, you only take a look at the end. Rav, and also like Rav, and according to Rav, there's machlokes as to whether a person has has a korban and he wants to go ahead and says it's two things. Do we use the first one or the last one? And over there, even if we know that his initial intention was to say both things, right? You obviously can't say two things at the same time. You can't say the word ola and chatas at the same time, right? One has to come first before the other. But if you intended to go ahead and say them both at the same time, Rava says even in that case, Rabbi Meir would hold that Tafas Lashon Rishon, you go after the first one, even though he intended to say both of them, you still only go after the one thing that was said first. So maybe over there, Dani Machlokes, and therefore, how do you explain it? So Hilkach, therefore, Hikdim Mulin Arelim, if he goes ahead and says those people have bris milah first, Arelim Mulin Chayili, Arelim Chayili. Therefore, in the end, we only take his first lashon. It was for people who had a bris milah and not, and therefore it's okay. However, Hikdim Arelim Mulin, but if he goes ahead and he puts ahead first the people who arelim who did not have circumcisions, and then he adds people who did have circumcisions. Arelim chayim mulin lo chayil. Therefore, we go after the tafas lashon rishon. We go after the first lashon, which would be those who did not have a bris milah. And since he mentioned that first, that is considered to be his only thought, and therefore that's the reason why that is no good. Lo chayil. And Omer Rabba says, Rabba, no, who says that's the case? Really, maybe you hold really, it's the entire process throughout, all right, of the shchita. And therefore, if he says it both, perhaps both would work. Right? So in other words, over here, basically what happens is he intends to say both of them, but he only ends up saying the first one, right? So if he only ends up saying that mulin, then it would be for mulin. If he only says arelim, even though he had in mind also for arelim and mulin, nevertheless, that does not count, and therefore, since it only was said out of his mouth, right, was people who non-circumcised, therefore it's no good. And over here there's machlokes. Rameir saver loy beinan pi v'libo shavim. According to Rameir, which is the acherim that we started off with today. So you don't need, right, your mouth and your heart to say the same. It only makes a difference what comes out. But Rabbanan saver beinan pi v'libo shavim. You need both of them to be the same. And since it wasn't the same, we identify. That he wanted to say both Arelim and Mulin, and therefore that does, even though he only said Arelim, it counts as both, and therefore since it counts as both, it would be kosher because it's not entirely for people who are non-circumcised. So the Gemara says, we hold your mouth and that which you think those we don't consider to be the same. Or Meiser V'Amar Truma. Person's, he's a little busy, right? So he goes ahead and he has some produce there. He wants to call it Truma, and what comes out of his mouth is Meiser or Meiser, and he wants to make a Meiser, and it comes out Truma. Or that he says, I'm not gonna. He makes a neder. I'm not gonna go into this house, but he says the wrong house. But he says, okay, I'm not going to get hana from this person, and he accidentally says the wrong person. Lo amar klum ad piv liba shavim. Right? It doesn't count until both of them are the same. Notice we don't just say, oh, what came out of your mouth, that's it. No, it has to be what you intended, right? So since I didn't say what I intended, therefore it doesn't work. So you see that if he says la'arelim and doesn't end up saying lamulin, but he was thinking la'arelim and lamulin, that according to Rameir, even according to his rule, right, that shouldn't count as just for arelim. Salam Rabaye, Reisha Da'amar Simon Simon Risha Lamulin, the Simon Sheni Afle Arelim. So the case is like this. In the Reisha, he says the first pipe, there's two simanim, right, that one goes ahead and checks, as we saw in Chulin. So the first pipe, right, there's the trachea and the esophagus, right? So he says, Dalmar Simon Rishon Lamulin, right? The first one, as I'm cutting it, it's going to be for those people who are bris milah. And the second one is Simon Sheni Af Arelim, even to Arelim. So when you say Af, even means not only those who had bris milah and those who are Arelim. So therefore, that works okay. The Simon Sheni Nami Psicha Be Mulin, because while cutting the second pipe, he also has intentions for those people who have bris milah. He has intentions for both. So therefore, it's okay. However, Seifa, but in the Seifa, the second case, the Omar Simon Rishon Arelim, when he says the first one he's cutting is just for an Arel. Simon Sheni Lamulin. The Simon Sheni says for those people who have bris milas. The Simon Rishon Halab Hizchaba Mulin. And in the first simon, right, while cutting the first pipe, right, he has no intentions in this case of people with bris milah. They only were completely on the second one, not the first one. Rameir goes to Shitaso De'amar Mefalgin B'chatzi Matir, that he holds that intentions of pigel in other cases, but over here, basically we'll say that intentions can be split, right, on a chatzi matir, and half of the way you're matir. The way you're matir the animal is by cutting both pipes, right? If you only cut one pipe, that's half of a job, right? So even though intentions of a half a job is considered to be good intentions, so therefore, according to Rameir, since you have intentions on just arelim on the first pipe, and therefore, if you have a korban which is completely for arelim is no good, so therefore, having intentions on one of the pipe for arelim, right? People are uncircumcised is no good. And for Rabbanon the Tamaya, the Rabbanon who argue and say it doesn't make a difference which order you do it. It's always good because combined in there is good. Because he says, right, well, your intentions are, on one pipe doesn't count. It's not full intentions. It has to do with your complete intentions on both pipes, and this the combination of the two. The two simanim that he cuts open for the shechita, those have included both arelim and mulin, and therefore the Korban Pesach would be considered to be kosher.
Is this the Reish and the Sefer? Is that going back to our Mishnah, or is that
talking about the Reish and the Sefer of this brisa that we started with today? Right, the first
the
case
one we started with today. Okay, all right.
All right. Whether you said the mulin and then the arelim, and the second case
one I got it. Got it. Okay, got it.
Fine. All right. Now Mishnah. Now comes the Mishnah. It will be discussed around a block. So let's see the Mishnah. Hashaychet es Pesach al hachametz. Right. We know the pasuk in the Torah. See if it brings it down here. The psukim. I guess they're going to come in the next summit. Right. The pasuk says, right, lo yishchat al chametz dam zivchi. right? It says don't shecht, right? And chametz, right? The blood of the current Pesach. What does it mean? And chametz, you're not bringing chametz there. It means you own chametz, right? We define as owning chametz. We'll soon see where the chametz has to be. But one who shechs the current Pesach and he owns chametz, right? He still owns chametz. He didn't get rid of it all. Over b'loisase, he has violated loisase. That is the Tanakam. There's going to be three opinions. That is the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af hatam. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait, this is talking about an Erev Pesach. On Erev Pesach, we also have the Tamid ben Arbayim, as we mentioned. If you go ahead and you shech the Tamid ben Arbayim, you have also violated this, because it says Zevach. It doesn't say Pesach, right? Dam zivchi, right? The blood of my zevach. So therefore, the zevach also includes the tamid, which also is supposed to be shechted on Erev Pesach. So since it's referring to the time of Erev Pesach, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it also includes the tamid ben arbayim, which you cannot go ahead and shecht if you own chametz, and if you do own chametz, then you have violated it. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, ha Pesach be'arbasa lishma chayev. A current Pesach, if it's on the 14th and you do a lishma properly for the intentions of the current Pesach, that's when you're chayav for owning chametz. The shalol lishma pater. But if you do a shalol lishma, since it wouldn't be good if you shech the current Pesach right on Erev Pesach, it wouldn't be good. Then, so therefore, you're pater from owning for violating owning chametz while doing the Pesach. Obviously, you're chayav for owning chametz for other reasons, as we saw. Shar kol hazvachim, and when it comes to other karbanos. Bein lishman, bein shelo lishman, pater. You're never pater in Erev Pesach. In other words, that which you be a chayiv on Erev Pesach is only referring to the current Pesach. The current Pesach is the only one that you violate if you do lishma, as we saw earlier, according to Rabbi Shimon, that if you shech that on Erev Pesach by owning chametz, you have violated lav of leisisbach adam zivchi. Uva moed. Now during Chol Moed, right? Chol Moed, where there's still a prohibition of owning chametz, and you shech, stuff, and you karbanos there, and you own chametz. Uva moed shelo lishmo pater. Excuse me, lishma pater. If you do lishma, because the current Pesach, let's say brought in the middle of Chol for the shame current Pesach is no good, so therefore you've not violated. It's not a good korban. However, shalol lishma, if you go ahead and you take your current Pesach, you didn't shech it on the 14th, and you shech the middle of Chol for a shlamim, shalol lishma, you did it for a shlamim, it works as a shlamim. So since that is a kosher korban during Chol and you own chametz, therefore you have violated the leisase of shechting while owning chametz. The shar kol hazvachim and all of the kabbanos bein lishman bein shelo lishman chayiv, whether lishma or not, those you're chayiv for doing on a chol hamoed, because once again, you're not allowed to own chametz, and those kabbanos are meant to be brought, it can be brought on Erev during chol hamoed, and therefore you're chayiv there. But the other kabbanos you wouldn't be chayiv on. You wouldn't be chayiv on Erev Pesach, because on Erev Pesach, according to Rabbi Shimon, only the current Pesach lishma one would violate that you should not shecht al dam zivchi if you own chametz. And chutz min achatus, except for the chatus sheshachtu shelo lishma, except for the chatus that was shechted shelo lishma, because that is not good for anything. That is not a good korban. If it's not a good korban, then you've not violated the loisase. Fine. So let's see the bottom of the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. So the Gemara starts off, Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish, L'yolam Eino Chayiv. We're going to have a machloikas, so let's remember the names. The first opinion is Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, L'yolam Eino Chayiv ad sheyeh hachametz l'sheichet o l'zorek, unless the chametz is owned either by the person doing the slaughtering, the kohen doing the shechita, o l'zorek, or the one going ahead and throwing the blood of the mizbeach, or one of the members who are part of the group of the current Pesach. Let's say the current Pesach is for 10 people, right? They all do it together, and one of them owns chametz, therefore is a violation. And says Reish Lakish, until it's with them in the azar, all right? Until it's with them, the chametz is actually with them in the azar. In the Beis Hamikdash. And Rabbi Yochanan Omer, Afal pi she'ein imo ba'azara. Rabbi Yochanan says, I agree with you until everything except, right? Now there's the shechter, the zarek, any people of the chabura, but the chametz doesn't have to be with them. So b'bai k'miflagi, what's the machlokes here? If you're telling me, because the pasuk says, right, leisishchat al chametz dam zivchi, right? Don't shecht an chametz. What does an mean? So maybe they're arguing as to what the lashon al means, right? maybe even al b'samach, whether al means has to be close by, nearby. The Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish saver al b'samach. He holds it has to be in the azara, so therefore it has to be close by. But Rabbi Yechanan saver al b'samach. You don't need to be close by. They already argued about this one time. That's now we learn in the Mishnah. Hashayche toida lifnim ulachayma. So he says Hashayche toda lifnim. One who goes ahead and he shechs his toda inside, right? I think it should say velachma. It says the I don't know. Does anyone else's word say l'chayma? Chutz l'chayma? I think it's lachma. It should say it's bread, right? Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Usually, this
name lachoma. I think it means like inside the wall of Yerushalayim, but not.
No, it's velachma. It's his bread's in with him. It's talking about the bread.
But the Gemara has the word v'lachayma.
Yeah.
I have the Steinsaltz. It has it written as velachma.
Okay, good, right. So you say ulachma chutz l'chayma. So one who goes out and shechs a Torah, we know a korban Torah is brought and there's breads with him, and he sanctifies the breads during the shechita. Where are these breads located? So one who goes out and shechs it, he has his Torah shechted on the inside, ulachma chutz l'chayma, and then his bread is outside. Lo kidei shalechem. Right? The bread is not sanctified. My chutz l'chayma. What is chutz l'chayma over there? What does it mean outside? So Rabbi Yochanan Omer chutz l'chayma is beis pagi, all the way outside of Yerushalayim. About chutz l'chayma azara kaddish. But he says, as long as it's it's in Yerushalayim, even if it's outside the azara, it's okay. And therefore, you don't really require al b'samach. As long as it's somewhere in Yerushalayim, it's okay, right? And Rabbi Shimon Lakish Omer, afilu chutz l'chayma azara like kidesh. Even if it's outside the mikdash, it's outside the azara, the bread is not sanctified. Alma. So what do you see over here? Be'in and al b'samach. Right? What do you see over here? We see the word that al is b'samach, right? So we already have this identical machlokes as the word al means you have to have imamish your chametz there, or in that case you have to have your lachme toda right next to you, or in the azara, or it could be farther away. So why you bring the same machlokes twice? So elo maybe it means bahasras safek kabiflagi. Over here that we're talking about hasras safek. In other words, like over there you give hasra, a person gives a warning. In order to be chai for so you have to be given a warning. So someone gives a warning, he doesn't know whether he has chametz in his house, right? So therefore, if it's in the house, right, you can't get the hasra. If it's right here in front of you and says, hey, you can't have the korban shechted, the korban pesach shechted while you own this chametz, you got to go ahead and destroy it or get rid of it. So then that's a good hasra. But if I said, well, you can't, do this if you have chametz in your house, well, that's the person giving the hasra is only safek. He doesn't see it, right? He can't see it. So maybe it's a hasra sa'el b'hasra safek miflagi. So Gemara says, "Bahanami ha'plegi b'chad zimna." They actually also Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan also once had this machlokes. The Itamar shvua she'oichel kikar zu hayom v'avar hayom v'lo achla. Person says a shvua that I'm going to go ahead and eat this loaf of bread today, and the entire day passes and he doesn't eat it. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish damar tavayu eina loike. Both of them say you're not loike, but for different reasons. You don't get malchus in that case. Rabbi Yochanan he holds one thing. Now the person said he was going to go ahead and eat this bread, right? He was going to eat this bread and he didn't eat it. So therefore, not eating bread, there's no maisa, right? There's no maisa. So therefore, you can't get a malchus for having that maisa, right? He abstained from doing something, so he just sat there and did nothing all day, right? He watched the Bears playoff game, right? So he didn't do anything. So therefore, that's the reason I don't get malchus. But the hasra was okay. Person give a warning, right? You have to eat it. Now, when you say if you eat it, right? If you don't eat it, then you're violating. So there's never a point where a person doesn't eat it, right? If you eat something, I can see you're about to put it in your mouth, right? So therefore, I can give you hasra before. But if you don't eat it, you're going to get malchus. You violated your vow to go ahead and eat it. Well, at what point did you violate it? At 10 o'clock, at 10:30, at 11, at 2:30, right? It's the entire day. So therefore, that's called hasra safek. Shmei hasra. So he said no, because it's considered to be an hasra safek, and therefore, if it's hasra safek, so therefore in this case, we would say it is considered to be, according to Reish Lakish, it is considered to be of a hasra suffix lo shmei hasra, and therefore in this case the hasra is not good, and that's the reason why he doesn't get malchus, as opposed to the other one. The problem was hasra suffix. The problem was that it was a lav shema ma'isa. If a lav shema ma'isa malchus, but according to Reish Lakish, you would get malchus for a lav shema ma'isa. So what do you see from here? That they actually argued already about whether a hasra suffix is considered to be a good hasra. So why do you need to argue in the case of if one of you guys own chametz, which I can't see in your house, right? That you're chayiv for if that's hasra suffix. So the Gemara says, Amri liyayla be'al b'samach kamifli. Really, it's the first way we said. Really, the arguing over here, the word, right? Lois hishchat al chametz dam zivchi. The al is the machlokes, whether it has to be al is mamash next to where he is, or it can even be in their homes. And you already said you argue about it twice. It's in chametz. If we had the machlokes by chametz, have I would have thought about kamar Rabbi Yechida loy being an al b'samach mishum iser hu. Chol heicha is iser, right? In other words, since that's an iser, wherever the bread is, so therefore he violates the Isser. He doesn't violate it whether it's here or there, right? When it comes to, let's say, Isser of owning chametz, right? It doesn't make a difference whether it's next to me or it's not next to me. Wherever it is, I own the chametz, and therefore the Isser is on me. So therefore, the location doesn't make sense. But to go ahead and sanctify the bread by offering the toda, and when you offer the toda, you sanctify the breads, right? Right? Only if it's next to you, right? If it's next to you, then it can be Mekadesh, but you can't be Mekadesh something that's a mile away. That's not logical. So maybe in that case, everyone would agree that the bread doesn't work. So therefore, in that case, right? In that case, maybe I would say that Reish Lakish would require, right, the breads to be close. Right? If it's close to him, then the bread is sanctified. If it's not close to him, it's not sanctified. Maybe everyone would agree there. So maybe the havia klisharis. It will be no different than the klisharis, which has to be right nearby in order for it to also, when you put things in a klisharis, in order to the klisharis to be mekadesh, things that go inside it has to be mamash inside it, right? You can't just say, oh, well, it's sanctified even though it's not in it. No, you need it. The location is important. So to over here, the bread's location is important. So therefore, we need it in that case. And now, why do we need in our case? And therefore it's tzricha. And if we just had the machlokas over there by al in the case of sanctifying bread, whether it has to be by you or not, havamina, I would have thought the daf over there, Reish Lakish held that the bread has to be close by. If it's close to you, then the bread is sanctified. But if the bread is not active, it's not sanctified. But when it comes to chametz, right? Maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yochanan that you don't need the bread to be mamish, in the azara, right, by the mikdash, right? The isuru is an isur, b'chol heicha the isa, and wherever the isur is, it is. Therefore, it's shricha. Therefore, it makes sense to have this machlokas in both cases, both in the case of kidesh lechem, and also in the case of owning chametz when it comes to offering the carbon pesach. Fine. So Boimidei, or still Samach Gimel days, maybe 7 lines up in the skinny lines, towards the bottom of the skinny lines. So Boimidei, Rav Oshia, me Rabbi Ami, Elo l'sheichet v'yesh lo yechem v'yechabura mahu. So if, let's say, the sheichet doesn't have any chametz, but somebody, one of the people of the group, what is the halacha there? So Amalei, miksiv loisishchat al chametzka. It doesn't say you can't shecht, right, for your chametz, right? You can't shecht that if anybody owns chametz, right, not just yours. So the person shechting is violating by shechting it if one of the bnei chabura own the chametz. So maybe anybody in the world, right? There can't be chametz in the world if you shecht it, right? So maybe it means that. The pasuk says lo yishchat v'lo yalin. It says you should not go ahead and shecht it, and then it says in the same pasuk it says v'lo yishchat al chametz dam zivchi v'lo yalin leboker zevach chag haPesach. That's the pasuk I just read on the side. So it says in the same pasuk v'lo yalin, right? So it says both. So it says so Amar Lo Yisisha but Lo Yalin Lo Yisisha al Chametz Hinach Dekam Yalam Mishum Lo Yalin. Those who you have lo yolin, that applies lo tishchat. So therefore, it's teaching you that only those people, right, who are going to have this Korban Pesach, they shouldn't leave it over, right? So those people are the people who can't own the chametz, and not a general any chametz in the world or any chametz owned by Jews can shech the Korban Pesach. And Amar al Papa Hilkach Kohen Hamakter is a chelev over b'lois asay. Hoil v'yeshna b'chlal halonas emurim. According to this far, says Rav Papa, right? A Kohen, so they go ahead and they burn, right, some of the some of the fats and some of the parts of the Korban Pesach on the mizbeach. So therefore, right, so he also would violate burning the fats, right, because that's type of offering, right? So a Kohen who burns the fats, he would also he would violate a loisase, since he's also included in in not leaving over, since he shouldn't leave over the parts, same as the people should not leave over the Korban Pesach. So therefore, him owning chametz would be the same. And Tanya Kavasi Rav Papa, we have a Bryson Rav Papa. Hasheichet es Pesach al chametz over b'loisase. One who goes in and checks a Korban Pesach al chametz violates a loisase. Emasai one is the abis manshu l'sheichet or l'zarek or l'echam mimei chabura. That's when, as we said before, either the sheichet or the zarek, the kohanim are involved, or one of the people of the chabur are going to eat from the Korban Pesach. And then right? But if somebody else in the world had, then it doesn't make a difference. It's okay if they own chametz. We didn't violate anything by offering our Korban Pesach with that person owning chametz. V'yechad ha-sheichet, v'yechad ha-zarek, v'yechad ha-makter chayev. So the one who shechs is chayiv because he's shechting an animal that's owned, that one of the participants owns chametz. The one who is zarek the dam is offering. He's also part of the offering the korban, right? And also one who makter, one who burns the fats. He also violates, just like the sheikh and the zarek. So too is the makter, like Rav Papa said, violates this iser. Aval hamelik hasav barabasar ain't no. But one who goes malika, right? He does malika, right? That the bird offering, you do malika. A person, let's say we discussed cases of a person, he needs to become tummy, he needs to bring his korbanos that day. He didn't bring it before the tummy berabayim, so therefore he brings his chatas off in the afternoon. We say it's okay, even though he shouldn't have done it l'chachila, but we say it's okay because of the purpose of eating the Korban Pesach. So you say hamalik is oif bar basar eino klum. If he does the malika and the guy owns chametz, it's okay. So that was the brisa which supported Rav Papa because it says over there hamakter. So now we have a brisa, similar brisa, but actually it flip flops a couple of halachas. Hasheichet is a pesach al chametz. Say Rabbi Yehuda Imer af hatamid. Rabbi Yehuda says even the tamid is brought and there's somebody owns and he owns chametz. He is violating. So Amar lo amru ela al pesach. So they said no. We disagree, Rabbi Yehuda, only if you the Korban Pesach and not the tamid if you own chametz. So Amosai, when we say this, bisman sheyesh li sheichet ol zarek ol yachim ben chabura. So therefore, this agrees. What are we talking about? With either the sheichet, the zarek, or people the chabur own, but if someone at the end of the world owns, that we don't care about. Now, where's the kasha? Where's the contradiction? V'yechad ha-sheichet, v'yechad ha-zarek, v'yechad ha-molek, v'yechad ha-mazeh chayiv. So earlier we said the one who shechs or does zrika or burns the fats, right? But over here we're saying the one who shechs, the one who does zarek, and now includes the bird offerings, right? The one who does malika, that would be chayiv. The person owns chametz, or one who sprinkles the blood from the malika offering, he would be chayiv. And earlier we said the malika, that korban doesn't count because he said it only applies by the Korban Pesach. So aval hakoymetz is a mincha, and over b'leis to say, but one who does the mincha, if the one brings the mincha offering that afternoon, he would not violate it. And hamakter seimurim eino over b'leis to say. And here it says the favorites. Bottom line says one who goes ahead and burns the fats, and let's say he owns chametz, he would not be in violation of anything, right? That's not considered to be part of offering, right? The one who burns the fats. So kasha. So we have a couple concepts. First of all, kasha malika. First of all, we have a contradiction when it comes to the malika. When it comes to the, right, when you take the bird and you cut its neck, that's the shechita with his thumb, right? So first of all, the first one says malika is nothing. The second one says you are violating malika. So, and also kasha haktara, right? The first one said the one who burns it is chayiv, and now the second brisa said the one who burns it is not chayiv. So he says, I l'tamich tik shelachahi gufa. Like Tani lo amru el pesach bilvad. First of all, it says we only talk about the Karban Pesach by itself, right? Because if you look at when Rabbi Huda said afatamid, and then they replied to Rabbi Huda when he said the Isser also applies to the tamid. He says no, only for the Karban Pesach. So only for the Karban Pesach. So what are you talking about, Malika and birds, right? That's not the Karban Pesach. So that's a contradiction in itself. So you say, and then it brings in talking about cases of bird offerings, bird chatas offerings. So what are you talking about bird chatas offerings if we're talking about it only applies to the Karban Pesach? So Ella, Rabbi Shimon. So rather we say that it's according to Rabbi Shimon of our Mishnah, right? Of our Mishnah. And we said, according to Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah, that on Erev Pesach, the only thing that we're talking about is talking about the Karban Pesach. That's the only time you can be chayav for Oni Chametz. However, when it comes to during the holiday, when there's still an Isser of Oni Chametz, right, then any korban which is brought properly during that holiday, right, everything basically but the Karban Pesach, those you would violate the Isser. So therefore it says when you're chayav for the Malika, it's not talking about on Erev Pesach, it's talking about referring to during Chol Hamoed itself, during the holiday of Pesach and not anything else. And not Erev Pesach. And a Malika like Kasha, and we say when it comes to Malika, it's also not a contradiction, right? One is on the 14th, and the other one is Chol Hamoed. When it comes in the 14th, you're potter from Malika because only the Lefi Rabbi Shimon, only the Karban Pesach you be chayav for shechting and chametz. And when it comes to Chol Hamoed, then you would be chayav. The Rabbi Shimon, and this is Rabbi Shimon, right? And Haktar Nami like Kasha also is not a contradiction. Tanahi. We say even according to Rabbi Shimon, there's a machlokas. Is burning the fats, right? Is the haktorah the same as the shchita? So there's a machlokas lefi Rabbi Shimon. Some say that burning the haktorah is the same as shchita. So just like one who shechs the karban is chayiv for if one owns chametz, so too one who burns the fats is chayiv if one owns chametz. And the other one says no. Burning the fats is not the same as shchita. It's not one of the avodas, and therefore one doing haktorah, it's not considered avoda to be chayiv in that case. Fine, 2 dots. So back in the Mishnah, which we saw on Samach Gimel and Aleph. So we said Hashechet is a Pesach al Chametz over Belois say that was the Tanakama, and Rabbi Huda says even the Tamid, if you shech the Tamid while owning Chametz on Erev Pesach, when we're also be chayiv violating the Isser of Oni Chametz while shechting the korban. Now, my time is the Rabbi Huda. Zivchi. It says the pasuk doesn't say right. Loisishchat al chametz dam pischi. Right. It says dam zivchi. My zevach. Right. So it says zivchi. So zevach amichali my niu tamid. It's the korban that's muchad special to me. Right. Which is the korban of the Talmud. Fine. You look for keys? Oh, okay, fine. All right. Sorry. All right. 2 dots. Rabbi Shimon. Now we get to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who we basically discussing. We said Erev Pesach. That's when you're chayav for the Erev only for the Karban Pesach, but nothing else. And the other days, it's basically everything else but the Karban Pesach. Now, my time to Rabbi Shimon. So Dechsiv Zivchi Trezim. The pasuk says Zivchi twice, right? It says Lo Sizbach al Chametz Dam Zivchi, and then it continues V'Lo Yalin Chelev Chagi Ad Boker. And that's another pasuk. 1 second, right? Excuse me. It says Lo Sizbach al Chametz Dam Zivchi V'Lo Yalin La Boker Zevach Chag Pesach. All right. So over there, lost place, right? So we say over there. So it says the word Zivchi twice. So Karei Bei Zevach and Zivchai. Right? So basically you take the yud from one of them, right? And as Rashi says, right, Trei Kroik Sivi Shakil Yud Dechad Minayu V'Shadi Aidach. Right? You take the yud from one and then went to the others. The Karei, and therefore I'm just reading from Rashi, the Karei Zevach. It says the zevach, right? Don't do the zevach, i.e. the haina of the Pesach. The karabeh is zivchai l'shar zvach, and then that one says zivchai my offerings. So when is it my offerings, and when is just the zevach? So the zevach is on Karban Pesach. My offerings is during the Yontif, during Chol Hamoed, when you bring multiple karbanos, all those you can be chayiv for bringing al chametz. So, karibei zevach zivchai, so lamai hilchasa. So palgidu the rachman me'adadi. So therefore they're split. So where it says lamai hilchasa palgidu the rachman me'adadi. So why do they separate? If loik siv zivchai, just write zivchai once. Why have to write it twice? So lameimar bezman dika zevach lamechai v'zivchi, to teach you when there's just the obligation to go ahead and bring one zevach, then you're not chai for all for the other karbanos. So if you bring any other karbanos on Erev Pesach, even the Talmud or anything else, you're not chayiv for shechting it ala chametz. Bisman the like a zevach, but when there is no Karban Pesach, it's still an isser of chametz, i.e., not Erev Pesach, but rather once Pesach begins, then mechayiv av zivchi. Then you're chayiv for the other zvachim, i.e., during Chol Hamoed, you'd be chayiv for all the other stuff. You just wouldn't be chayiv for the Karban Pesach. We brought it later. You wouldn't be chayiv for bringing karban on chametz. Fine. So he said, and the Chol Hamoed, if you brought it, the Karban Pesach lishma, we pater. The other ones, you'd be always chayiv. So where it says, Satama Shalol Lishma, it sounds like if he brought it Shalol Lishma, Stam Pater. If he brought his Karban Pesach Stam with no intention, he didn't bring Shalol Lishma, he brought it Stam, he would be Pater, right? So only if he brought it Shalol Lishma, then he brought his Karban Pesach as a Shlamim on Chol Hamoed, then he's Chayiv. But if he Stam brought it, he would be Pater. So Pesach b'Shei Mos Hashana Shlamim Havi. Well, I understand Pesach during the other days of the year is considered to be a Shlamim. So if he's bringing the Shlamim, he should be Chai for it. So why is he Pater? So is this Shmami no Pesach b'Shei Mos Hashana by Akira, that during the other days of the year, if you have a Korban Pesach during the other days of the year, you need an Akira, you need an actual. If you have your Korban Pesach, right? Let's say you set it aside 2 months early, and then you just bring it as a Shlamim earlier, right? You bring it a month early before a Pesach, right? And you don't have any intentions. You don't say anything, right? So do we have to assume that you brought it for something else, right? For a Shlamim, because you didn't outright say it's for Shlamim, right? You didn't change the mode. Now, if you were just quiet, right? That doesn't consider to be a significant amount. Significant by just offering it, you have to go ahead and say something. So too over here, right? It says only if you said, okay, this is a shlamim, then he's chayiv. But if you didn't say anything, right, then it's like it's Karban Pesach. So same thing throughout the year. If I say, oh, this is a shlamim, it's good. But if I bring my Karban Pesach 2 months early and I don't say a word, it's like I brought it as a Karban Pesach. It's no good. So I'm Rabbi Chia bar Gamda nizikra mipi chabura amra. So they said, one of them answered, so from the Chabura, so he said, Kagoin shahayu balim timei mes, right? So maybe we're talking about a case, in our case, it was the 14th was supposed to be brought, and it wasn't because one of the people were tamei mes, and therefore it was pushed off the Pesach Sheni. So this animal was still going to be brought as a Karban Pesach. The stam l'shum Pesach, and therefore stam is l'shum Pesach. So therefore, in that case, since it became tamei, and they're going to go ahead and bring it in a month, so therefore this one was destined to bring brought the Karban Pesach, and therefore, if he brought it stama, it would still be for the Karban Pesach, as opposed to the other case throughout the year. Then it's not necessarily fit to be brought as the Karban Pesach, and therefore to remove it from bringing it brought as the Karban Pesach, you'd have to verbalize or say something that was brought as a shlamim and not as a Karban Pesach. Fine.
Now your Mishnah.
We got a very popular Mishnah now, long Mishnah. So the Mishnah on Samach Daled Amud Aleph, a couple lines from the bottom of the skinny lines. So now we're gonna start talking about the description of the Karban Pesach on Erev Pesach. So let's see what happens. Zok the Mishnah. Ha Pesach nishchat b'shalosh kitos. The Karban Pesach is basically shechted during 3 groups, during 3 time periods. Shnei as the pasuk says, "V'shachtu oso kol kahal adas Yisrael." Right. So it says, and you shecht it, all of it, kol kahal adas Yisrael, as the pasuk point, as the Mishnah points out. Nichnasak. So basically, there's kahal is 1 group, Ada will say Ada is 2, Yisrael is 3. So it's 3 groups under Pesach. Nichnasak kasa rishayna. They go ahead and they fill in the first group comes in Ismail Hazara, then the Hazara becomes full. And no delatos hazar, and they close the doors, right? and taku hariyu v'taku. They go ahead and they blow a tekiah, a trua, and tekiah. The kohanim oindos shuros, and the kohanim stood in rows. And in their hands were bowls of silver and bowls of gold, and shura kula kesef, shura kula zav. And then there was one each row. Let's say one was a silver row, and then one was a gold row. And loyu meurvin loyu bezichin shulayim. So it says, first of all, they wouldn't go ahead and mix them up together. They would have the state of the gold and the silver, so they wouldn't get mixed up. And they also the bowls, right, in the mikdash were not flat. They're not like bowls or cups you put down on the floor, because then if you put it on the floor and the blood is not being, and someone's holding the blood, then perhaps the blood could congeal because you're going to forget about it. So therefore, it was basically something you couldn't just put on the ground and stand up on its own, because then either it would spill because it was pointy, and therefore they wanted the kohen to be active with the blood to move to mix it around so the blood wouldn't go ahead and congeal. Now, what would happen next? Shacha Yisrael, then Yisrael will go ahead and shech if it kibil hakoy. So because shechita is kosher by Yisrael, it was lavdafka Yisrael had to, but the shacha Yisrael the kibil hakoy, and then the kohen does the kabbalah. Nice and the chavero. Then he goes ahead and he gives it to his friend and he passes over towards the mizbeach. Makabo samali machzer sarekan. You go ahead and so first he would give me the one full of the blood if I was a kohen, and then I would give him back the other one. So basically, they would always, they would pass, they would pass them back and forth. Kohen hakarev etzel mizbeach zarku zrika echad keneged hayisa. Then over there, when you get the blood, the kohen is close to the mizbeach.
The zrika always done, no matter which korban, always done by kohen. The alicha can be the alicha is by Israel, but
from
the alicha by Israel, but the zrika is by kohen.
From the Kabbalah, from the receiving of the blood. The only part of the avoda that can be done by Yisrael is the shechita.
The shechita. All the other 3 steps are by kohen.
Right, the Kabbalah, the Halicha, and the Zrika, all done by Kohanim. And there's actually machlokas whether shechita can be done with a zar, with a non-Kohen or not. But this mission obviously holds that it can be done by Yisrael. So they would go over here, they would pass with the Kohen, who's all the way by the Mizbeach, and he would go ahead and do the Zrika at the bottom by the Yisod. And Yatsa Kas Rishayna v'Nichas Kas Shniya. And then now, so that was the first group. When they were done, Yasakas, Rishana v'Nichas, then the second group would come in, Yasa Shniya, and then they would do what they said. They would do just like the first group, and then the second group would leave, and then the third group would come in, and Kamaisa Rishana, Kach Maisa Shniya v'Shlishis, in the same procedure that we said that was done. The first group was done by the second and third group, and Koru has a Hallel. They would say the Hallel while the korban was being offered, was being brought, and in Gamru Shano, if they finish the Hallel, they would go ahead and repeat it and start it again. The Shano Shilshu, and if they finish the second time, they do it a third time. And Afal Pi Shalo Shilshu Mimeyam, they were supposed to do it a third time, but no one ever finished the third time. I guess it didn't take that long to say Hallel 3 times, right? I guess maybe it depends what shul you're in, right? So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Miyameyam Shalkas Shlishis Lahiglu Lahafti Kishma Hashem Mipnei Shama Muatim. The third group, they never got to the point in Hallel of a Hafti Kiyushma Hashem, because that was a little later in Hallel, and therefore the third group was always the smallest, and therefore by the time it took them to do the third group, they're already completed before they even finished the first time, even got to the pasuk of a Hafti. Now, Kamaseu Bechol Kach Ma'aser v'Shabbos, the same way they did it during the week, they also did the same way on Shabbos. Ela Shah Kohanim Medichim Es Hazara Shelo B'Ras Chachamim. But they would go. The Kohanim would go ahead, and we'll see this in the Gemara. We'll talk about in the Gemara. The Kohanim went ahead and basically washed off the floor, but the Chachamim were did not like that. It was considered basically to be too much work on Shabbos. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer, they would go ahead and they would basically fill up a cup from the floor of the mixture of all the different Karim Pesachs, and Zarka Zrika Achas Al Gav Mizbeach Lo'edochamen. Go ahead and be Zarek that blood from the combination of all the Karim Pesach, and that was the thing that the Chachamim frowned upon. So we'll have to see that in the Gemara. Now, Ketzad Tolenu Mafshitin. How would they go ahead and they would have to skin the animal and hold it up in mafshitin. So unkliyos shel barzel hayu kvuim b'ksalim amudim. Right, there were hooks that were on the ksalim on the walls and on the pillars in the mizbech in the area. Shebahan toilin mafshitin. Now over there, they would basically hold up the animal and they would skin the animal. They would flay it. And kol mi shein lo makom litlos lahafshin. And if there was no space there, then makalos dakim v'chalikim hayusham. They would take these poles over there. Manicham aksefa aksefa chavera. Basically, they would put the poles on their shoulders and they would hang the animals from there. V'tola umafshin. And they would hang the animals from there and go ahead and flay them from there. And Rabbi Eliezer says, Arba Asar Shachal Yais b'Shabbos. If it came out on Shabbos, then Maniach Yodo al Kasaf Chavero v'Yad Chavero Kseifa v'Tolim Rashi. They wouldn't use the poles, rather they just put their arms and I guess use the support of the other person's shoulder, and then basically hang the animal from there as they would skin it, because they couldn't go ahead and use the poles. All right, we'll have to see that in Gemara what Rabbi Eliezer argues on. And Karuv Haitzias Emurav, they would go ahead and they would tear open the animal and they would take out its Emurav, the parts that they were burnt on the Mizbeach, the fats and stuff. And Nasnu Bamagis, they would go ahead and put it in a bowl. Viktira Mizbech will burn on Mizbech. Yasab Kas Harishena. So the first group would come out. The Yashala Baharbais stayed on Harbais, Shnia, B'Chayil. The second one went out and they remained in the Chayil. And the Ashlishis Bimkaima Medes. And the third people, they would be in basically in the area, they were in the Azara where they were, and Chashchu Yatzav Tzales Pischem. And then when it became dark, then they would all go home because it's Shabbos, and they would go ahead and roast their karbanos, right? But they wouldn't, leave before that. Right, that was the Mishnah. We'll have to go ahead and go, part by part to explain it. Now, Zok the Gemara, top of Samach Dalet Amud Beis, around 6 lines on the top. So Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak, Eina Pesach Nishchad El B'Shleish Kita Shel Shleishim B'nei Adam. Each one is a minimum. Each group is a minimum of 30 people. My timer. What's the reason? Kahal ve'Eda Yisrael. It says over there, Kahal, Eda. You saw 3 different lashonos, and Mispekel on Eve, Asachas Eve, Zechazeh. So we're not sure if the 3 groups should be all together, or it means 3 groups one after one. Therefore, have each one be 3 groups. So basically a total of 90. What's that? Shua. Who are you looking for? Oh, yeah. Sorry. So sorry about that. So you say, so therefore you need 3 groups in each there, which would be 90 people. Because then you fulfill both, right? You have 3 groups in one, i.e. there's 30 people. Or if you have 3 different groups, then you also fulfill that. You can even do it with 50. Why? You can bring in 30 people and they go in the first one. Then then maybe 10 people can leave and 10 people come back. Right, and therefore, so if 10 new ones are replaced, the 10 that left. So therefore, you still have 30 people there, and then those 10 bring, and then 10 come in, and then 10 come out, and therefore each one there'll be 30 people there in the Azar each time, and at least 10 people are bringing it each time. So therefore, it fulfills it because there's no, as we saw, there's no obligation to have, excuse me. No obligation to have 30 people do it 3 times. So just either 30 people at once, which was the first time, or 3 groups, 10, 10, 10, which they also fulfilled that way. Fine. Nichnas kas rishayna. Then we said, so to that, so the first group, they come in. So Itamar Abayi, Omar, Ninulu Tanan, and Rov Omar, Nolin Tanan. Abayi says the gates closed on their own. And Rova says they closed them. So my benayu. So what's an afkamina? So ikbenayu lemismach anisa, to be samich upon a miracle for the gates to close on their own. So bayom analu tanan kama dialu malu v'samchina anisa. Right. Whoever goes in, therefore you can go ahead and be samich on a nasa for closing on its own. And Rav Omar nolin tanan v'loisamch anisa. They wouldn't go ahead and rely upon a miracle. I v'had tanan that which learned in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda chas v'sholom shekavia ben mahalel nisnada. It says Chas v'Shalom that Kavi was big tzaddik, right? That he was put in nidui, right? He was put in some sort of he was in cherem. Shein Azar Nilas Al Kol Adam Yisrael, right? Because he didn't lock out anybody, right? He didn't close out for Yisrael. So it wasn't that the fact that it was closed out, because he says that he was great of Chachma Yiras Achet, Chavi ben Halal, and Abai. So he said over there that let's see, Rashi 1 second. Right. So this is a Mishnah in Maseches Edyos, right? So he said he was a chem. So he said so the case over there was he put a chem. The question was really why. So he said Abai Matar Satame Ein Be'azar B'Shash Shenigol Al Kol Adam Yisrael B'Chachma V'Yira B'Chet Akavi B'Mahala. So he says what it means over there is there was no one in the Azara, right, when it was closed, right, who was like a kavi b'mahalal. In other words, the reason why it was closed is when it was closed, there was no one, right, who was not who was as great as him, and therefore they were closed on their own. And Rav Matar Tzatami Ein Be'azara B'Shash Shenolim Osa Al Yisrael. It says there was no one in the courtyard, right, in the Azara, when they closed on everyone, when it, basically who was as great as kavi b'mahal. So over there, the point was, did it say it was closed or it was closed on? So each one says either they closed it or it was closed on, but they both have the same meaning, that nobody was on the level of a kavya ben mahalel. And the point was over there that even though the Mishnah over there sounds like the girsa it was closed, but each one will explain that either it was closed on them or they closed it. And Tanra Abanan Mi'elam Lo Nismaich Adam Bi'azara Chutz Pesach Echad Shaya B'mei Hillel Shenismaich Bo Zakin Echad Vayukarnasa Pesach Movin. Right? There was never somebody that was crushed in the Azara except for 1 year Pesach. There were so many people there that they were crushed during during the days of Hillel. That one elder, right, the one Zakin got crushed, and they would call it the crushed Pesach, right? That was the memory of the 1 year, but even though there was hundreds of thousands of people that would come there, no one ever got crushed except for 1 year.
Wait, y'all, hang on a second. So we're saying, I get it, there's hundreds of thousands of people, but it says there was only 3 kitot that came into Shechter Korbanos. How many people? I mean, it sounds like that wasn't very many. That sounds like there was less than 90 Korbanos that were being brought, right?
So they were, I mean, we'll soon see in terms of the number, they actually try to take a census based upon there.
Okay. Or
so
was Korban like for 1,000 people?
So that was one of the Nisim where that there's somehow that everybody got in, and there was enough space, like we saw by Sukkot they would come in.
Yeah, but right, that I know, but it sounds like it was limited it through 30 people for each cot.
So that was the minimum amount per cake.
That's the amount. Sorry about that. You're right. Yeah, that was the minimum amount. They had to have at least that.
At least that amount. Oh, okay. All right, I missed that. All right.
Sorry about that. So Tanarabon Pamachas Bikesh Agribas Hamelach Litain Alav Be'ulchse Yisrael. He wanted to sort of know in how many Jews take a count. So Amar Leila Kohen Gadol, he says, "Oh, I know a good way. Teimei Necha B'Psachim and Nato Kul Yemei Kol Echad. Do me a favor. Go ahead and see all the karbanos that are coming in, and take the kidneys from each one. The Sham Shishim Ribo Zugi Klayos. It turns out there were 600,000, right, pairs of klayos of kidneys." And kafalim kiyetz Mitzrayim, like double that it came out of Mitzrayim, because remember each chabura there was multiple people. Chutz mitamev shayib b'derech choiga, and this doesn't even include the people who were tamei, doesn't include people who were far away. Ve'enachal pesach pesach shalonimnu alav yeitzir me'esrim b'nei adam, and he also didn't have more korban pesachim that didn't have at least 10 people on it because they couldn't have it to waste and the proper amount to be eaten. So each one had 10 people at least. So 600,000 times 10. 6 million, right? That's just the people included, not including those who were tummy mace. Pesach moving, and they would call it the Pesach that was thick, right? That's how many people were there, right? Such a lot of people, and so Gemara says, I understand. Not so coolio. How could he go ahead and take the kidneys if the kidneys were supposed to go ahead and be offered? So the Gemara answers, no. The hodar maktilu. Afterwards, he would go ahead and he would burn them. Right, so in other words, basically they were taken and they were used for account. But it says over there, you shall burn it, right? You can't all burn them all together. So how did he take them, and just burn them all together later on? You shouldn't mix them up. So the hader maktir lu chada chada. He would do each one, right? So in other words, he would burn each one. That you go ahead and you burn all the parts together. So you can't burn each kidney alone later on. You should burn it with the other fats and with the other parts that's supposed to be burnt. Basically, he would take, let's say, kidneys, and then after you take kidneys, he'd take a marble and put that marble, or a paper clip, right, and take that and use that as the counter. Then return the kidneys to the animal, and then have that burnt. So basically, he took a kidney and then replaced it with some sort of small item, and then basically count those items at the end. Excuse me, and that's how they got to 600,000 kidneys, because it wasn't actual kidneys, because they returned those to the karbanos, because those had to be burnt with the rest of the carbon. Fine, 2 dots. So he says the kohanim the shuros, they would stand right in rows. So my time of ilim dilma shakti dahava malikasva. If you say maybe he took gold and he was given something, he was given silver in return. Hakanami dilma shakti bar masan mali bar mea. Perhaps he took a heavier one and got a lighter one. So if you're worried about the value, so a value, maybe a thicker gold, versus a thinner gold, is just the same, could be the same difference as as gold and silver. Rather, this looked nicer. Since it looked nicer, so therefore they kept it in gold and silver, different rows. They didn't have the bowls didn't have anything on the bottom for it to stand on its own. So except for that which would hold the levona, the frankincense of the lechem apanim, that those did have. I guess those had wider bottoms, so it can go ahead and stand on its own. Shema yanichum v'yifros halechem, right? Because they would go ahead and put it up against the bread, and then the bread would basically would break, because they didn't want to go ahead and basically break up the bread. So therefore, they didn't want to go ahead and lean it or put it on lechapanim. So therefore, those were able to go ahead and stand on their own. And Shachar Yisrael have a kibbutz kohen, and the Yisrael would shech, and the kohen would do the Kabbalah. So lo yisagid alav Yisrael, but he had to be Yisrael. So he gufa komashalon the shechita bezar ksher. No, it's coming to teach you that it didn't have to be Yisrael, but Yisrael was allowed to do it because the shechita was kosher with the Yisrael. The kibbutz kohen's kashma mikabel ve'elach mitzvahs kohuna. That comes to teach you that bedafka has to be a kohen, because only a kohen afterwards is the mitzvah of the kahuna. And naisn l'chavero. And we say he gives the chavero. So shmamina halicha shalabarego have halicha. We learned from there that walking, without actually walking, i.e., passing it, is considered to be halicha. So dimya havi naid porte. Maybe each one moved a little bit. So ve'elamai kamashmalon. What's coming to teach you? Kamashmalon. That doing it all together is actually better, is preferred than each one walking. So therefore, since everybody had a hand in it, i.e., they each passed the bowl together to the next one to get it closer to the mizbeach, that was considered to be a good way. And kibel esamali maxis arekan aval ivchalo, right? You take the full one, and then you return the empty one. So Masai the Rabbi Shimon Lakish, don't Rabbi Shimon Lakish, ain't mavir mitzvahs. We don't pass the mitzvah. So in other words, if there's 2 things to pass, give me the one that we still need to do the mitzvah first, and then I'll give you the other one. So therefore, they're ain't mavir mitzvahs. Give me the mitzvah blood first, so I can go ahead and pass it, and then I'll return to you an empty bowl, which is not a mitzvah. And Kohen Akari Yitzhak Samaria Tana Pesach Bezrika. So who says, right, he did the zrika. So who's the Tana says the dafka bezrika and not shvicha? So Rav Chizda, Rabbi Yosef Glili, the Tanya, Rabbi Yosef Glili Aimer, as domam tizrak al mizbech ves chalbam takter. It says over there, by bechor, it says over there, tizrak, you throw the blood on the mizbech, and its fats you shall burn. So damah nemar ela damam, it's blood. So chabal lo nemar ela chalbam, right? They're fats. So limin al bechor meiser pasach. So it says, therefore, it teaches by 3 similar karbanos in terms of the way we treat the kedusha. Is the bechor, the firstborn male animal, right? Meiser, and the 10th animal, right? And also the karban pesach. Hey tunin matan damin ve'emurin legabi mizbech. They all require the same type of application of blood on the mizbeach, just like the bechor. So we know on the 2 in the Yisod. And how do we know that you put it on the bottom on the Yisod? So Amar Rebbe Elazar, Osio Zrika Me'ela. We learn Gzer Sheva from Ola. Ksiv Hach, it says over there, as Damam Tizuk. Alam Izbech. It says over there, by us, it says as Damam Tizuk that we just saw. Alam Izbech. Ksiv Hach says over there, by an Ola, it says V'zarkum Me'aron HaKodim as Damo Alam Izbech Saviv. It says there, you throw al mizbech savin ma'ula to yisod. Af pesach nami to yisod. Just like over there, it requires yisod. So too over here. I just top line of Samachem and Aleph, the Oila Gufim, and I know Ola itself gets on the Mizbeach. Samakra, the Pasuk says, El Yisod Mizbeach Oila, Alma Oila Tuna Yisod. It says over there, El Yisod Mizbeach by the Ola. So therefore we see that Ola requires Yisod, therefore Ola requires Yisod. It's compared to these other Karbanos, and therefore we see the Karban Pesach also requires to be to be spilled, or to be thrown on the Yisod at the bottom of the Mizbeach. All right, we'll stop here at the 2 dots. Shkoyach everybody, tomorrow Mitzvah Hashem. Regular time at after davening. Shkoyach.
Yeah.
Have a good one.